So thank you very much. I start recording,
Okay.
James. Yes. If you want to talk a little bit about your background and how you have entered in the story of business model, why it has become interesting for your business models in biotechnology, and which companies especially have been a model for you, have motivated you or inspired you to know more about their business models. Just a little bit, a few
Yeah,
words.
sure. My pharmaceutical background was with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in the United States. So I spent 11 years with Pfizer in the sales side of the house. The last role was a district manager for the state of New Mexico. And then after 11 years, I wanted to get into the biotech scene. And at that time, Pfizer was moving into a strategic direction of growing its biotech business. I think at that time, they had a goal of increasing their biotech revenue to 25% by some period in the future. And so I guess those were my first thoughts about what's going on in the industry. But what appealed to me at that time was getting more into the biotechnology or the biopharmaceutical side of that house versus a focus on the small molecules of the traditional pharma model, more of the developed bigger molecules. And so I came to Germany and I got involved in a series of three small biotech companies where I was playing a management role in the business side of that house. And then after completing a PhD or doctorate in economics with a focus on business model innovation in this industry, that's where I went from there. And then now I'm in a diagnostic company working on the diagnostic side of the house, which is very closely related to the types of challenges and the way the market is. And so that's kind of my background. As far as what interests me in terms of the business models in this industry, and it really comes down to the concept of highly knowledge-intensive industries. Mm-hmm. Whereas, and you can go back and look at previous, we'll call them industrial revolutions of the past, where we had the old industrial iron industries where innovation and a lot of the capabilities required to make the technologies and do the things within these industries was such that a lot of that brain power could be held in-house. You even see that with pharma companies up until the 1970s and 80s, prior to the development of biotechnologies, where a lot of that innovation was happening in the house. And then around the 80s, a change started where the search for innovation had started then and is becoming increasingly more now a function of looking outside of the company. And so business models that enable a firm's capabilities to identify where that knowledge is, and then overcome the second challenge of bringing it, capturing it, getting it into under their roof, and then utilizing that knowledge through a process of tacit knowledge development and capabilities and economies of scope, and then turning that into a product. That's really where I see a huge difference over the last 50 years of what's going on right now. And that is no small challenge. It's not only difficult to do, in that there's thousands of different islands of expertise out there that one has to first be aware of, which is the challenge. And then once you are aware of it, bringing it into your house in such a way that you can find the right idea and commercialize it. And so that is, as far as business models go in these types of industries, I think that's one of the more exciting areas to explore of how to harness the power within that area.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you very much. That's very interesting. While you were talking, I was several questions. Just before we started our talk, I was checking the Moderna vaccine, the famous Moderna. vaccine company. So I was just checking on their website if there is any information regarding their business model. Nothing. It's not, Moderna is not an exception. You know, we hear a lot about their business models, but it seems to me that still it's very abstract. It's as if it's a very hidden knowledge or hidden information with hidden facts that the companies, they do not intend to discuss this, you know, openly with outside. I do not know. I'm not even aware if inside the company, you know, they discuss this, or the business model is only belong, you know, to the head of the company. You know, he's the creator and he changes, you know, he managed the business model. Everything comes from one person. That's why the rest of the company is not involved in, and there is no information about it on their website. There is everything about their marketing, about innovation strategy, collaboration, everything, you know, annual report, but nothing about their business models. Even,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, even if it's very modern, and I think that, you know, this can be appealing for a company, can even attract more investors, you know. So on Moderna, you know, on their website, they say, we do the right thing in the right way. It's very abstract, you know, for a very scientific, that, you know, their job is very concrete. It's not philosophical. It's very abstract way to introduce themselves, you know. So it's
Yeah.
very hard to seize them. What are you doing in the right way? And how can you prove that it's the right way? So I just wanted to ask you, do you think that something like business model, people ask, is it real or it's just literature, you know, and how we can be sure that such thing exists really? It's not only literature.
Yeah, we may have a little channel bias here. I'm just trying to think. I don't know a lot about Moderna. But I guess I would answer this in a couple of ways. One is that it's the concept of a business model as it would be important to a marketing department of a large pharma company or biotech company would be such that they just don't think about a need for advertising what our business model is. They've got other focuses that they want to promote. And they probably just don't think about a business model per se as an explicit concept to promote. And it's probably more of a behind the scenes strategic concept that's discussed within the company. And even then, aspects are very implicit. I mean, the whole concept of a business model itself is a very nebulous concept, and there are different interpretations of what a business model is.
Definitely, yeah.
And so we may be seeing a little bit of that in the interpretation of what we may see on Moderna's site. Mm-hmm. But maybe you're asking a little deeper. You know, is there opportunity for companies to find a way to be a little bit more explicit about what their business models are and how that plays a role in there? And I would agree with, if that's the question, I would agree with that could be something that would be helpful for the public, investors, understanding that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. So what about Pfizer? That, because you know Pfizer, you know, the Pfizer adventure with BioNTech, you know, and the discovery of the vaccine for COVID. What do you think about this? How this innovation has happened? Is it due to their business model? My first question, do you think that, can you evaluate that this is something to do with their business model?
Yeah, I think we could say certainly a yes to that, in that vaccine is a collaboration with a German company called BioNTech, who is nowhere near the size of Pfizer. And so, you know, in that regard, Pfizer has looked external to its own R&D systems and R&D department for where that innovation lies. And then the search for innovation is indeed a component of a business model. And so in that regard, yeah, and that it has come from a company that is big and as capable in its R&D operations, I think does convey a sense that companies are looking external more and more, and especially with the big pharma. Vaccines, you know, that's an interesting segment of the greater biopharmaceutical industry, in that like many small molecules, it takes a tremendous amount of resources. I think the latest data that I've seen is that it sometimes takes up to 10 years and $1 billion to bring a molecule to market. You know, if you start with 10,000 compounds and go through the process of validation, preclinical, and through the series of clinical trials. So it's not something that a small new start company tends to be able to do without something really, really interesting that a lot of investors are willing to fund along the way. And I think vaccines may not fall into that as severely, in that the concepts of vaccine development are a little bit more understood. However, one of the challenges maybe is that I remember reading something a few years back that the reason that there's only a small number of companies that remain that are really engaged in the vaccine market, it has a lot to do with liability. And so some have just chosen it's not worth it. And that's where, so this COVID development has kind of changed the game, and is that it's opened up this as a market. It remains to be seen how sustainable it will be at the number of companies that are making it. I think there's like 12 or 13 different companies out there with vaccine development in their pipeline. And of course, this has been accelerated by the significant amount of government funding across not just the USA, through but Europe as well, and China as well. So that mitigates the risk for these companies to get involved in this development process. And through the emergency use authorizations, that speeds it. And there's probably some degree of promises about litigation coverage that is making them rethink it. I think I went a little bit out of scope of your question, but I hope I answered it.
No, it's good. Thank you very much. My question is, how a company, you talked about the big companies who are trying to see where the knowledge is, where the new knowledge is. But if a company, as an example, as big as AstraZeneca, or Pfizer, they cannot find such knowledge within the company, and they had to go for that outside. AstraZeneca with Oxford, I suppose that it was because it's cheaper for them. It costs less, it's less costly. That's why they go, they go to scientifics, and that's how they identify, the owners of the new knowledge. That's one of the reasons. Perhaps there are many other reasons, but Pfizer, isn't there any other startup in US or Canada that Pfizer could work with them? That's the question. Why they're working with BioNTech? Why? And isn't there any other substitute?
Maybe there are, and maybe Pfizer is talking to other companies. I don't know. If that's not happening, it would surprise me to know that it's not happening. I'm sure they are. However, BioNTech is on our radar only because they had a candidate that in their discussions with Pfizer deemed it to be something that's highly probable to successfully bring to market. And of course, it gets a lot of news because it's potentially one of the first on the market. But I wouldn't say that Pfizer's not doing that. I think that they probably have, tens of thousands of knowledge-seeking tentacles out there around all their R&D centers and venture capital and new start spin-outs around the world, constantly searching for innovative new technologies, because the nature of highly knowledge-intensive industries is such that even as powerful as a big pharma's R&D engine is, and as smart as those scientists are in there, that pales in comparison to the new knowledge that's floating around the ecosystem.
Okay.
And no one company is ever going to be able to contain or to fully develop that themselves. And that's a fundamental shift. I think in where we were just 50 years ago with with this digital revolution, sort of third industrial revolution.
Definitely.
Nobody can do that. And I think that would be my answer to that question.
Okay. And do you think that this accelerated pace of innovation, that's assured and supported by the public and private investment, and shortened regulations, everything that's advanced, these are the benefits for the companies that are working on vaccine projects. Do you think that this pace of innovation, it's also called responsible innovation because they're producing something for public health and for saving people's lives? And do you think that this may continue even after COVID vaccine? Because there are many questions, such as they say that, so if they could find a vaccine for COVID in less than 1 year, they can for sure find something for cancers, or any other diseases, to save many lives. Why it has never been done? Or can we be hopeful that as COVID has changed many things, can change this too?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I was having part of this conversation just the other day in terms of the fact that we had gone from zero to a vaccine inside of 12 months.
Yes.
The market does say a lot. Now, I don't think that anybody's sitting back and Dr. Evil saying we really can do this, but we're not.
Yes.
I think a constellation of different factors have all come together that have enabled an acceleration of this development. Part of which we just talked about earlier with the significant large funding, the emergency use authorizations. When you're talking with some of the other regulatory agencies, maybe not cutting corners, but streamlining the regulations that typically are put in place, not in some sinister way, but to ensure that what does come out on the market is safe and effective. And that. So that being said, I do think that the accelerated pace at which we have put these, what seem to be maybe our first two vaccines on the market, I think it will cause some thinking on both sides, both the regulatory, inside regulatory, as well as in the market itself, that will most probably result in some efficiencies because this process has probably forced some awareness of, all right, this is maybe not so efficient, this is broken. And through that process, I think what we'll find is enhanced efficiency, not maybe significantly and throwing the rule book away, but I think we'll find that it has helped. And I think that will remain with us, and we'll find that perhaps moving forward in 2021 and on, that the process for not just vaccines, but maybe many regulatory areas will be improved.
Okay, great. So many changes are coming in the next years. I hope so. Many positive changes, I think, that will happen after COVID.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's great. That's wonderful. If it's one of the outcome of the COVID, it's one of the best, I think. Yeah, it's one of the best. So I have another, I suppose this is rather an easy question for you. How do you evaluate the role of the new technologies, in the business model of those companies who are involved in vaccine manufacturing and vaccine discovery for COVID and beyond COVID? Do you think that there is a direct link between their access to new technology and the fact that they were able to do this in such a short time?
So are you asking, maybe I just want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking what is the process that companies go through in terms of deciding which drug they want to move forward with? Or
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's complicated, like most big questions like that. I think there's many factors, the important ones of which, or some of the important ones of which would be, companies, they have a finite set of resources that they know makes them capable in certain areas. And so they make strategic decisions, maybe in what types of disease states that they want to pursue. Many companies are heavily focused on cancer and infectious disease right now. So that's one area. What are we really good at, and where's the market going over the next 20 years? In terms of need, increased epidemiological rates of certain disease states, and that's an area that we want to build innovation for, not just because that's a profitable area to go into, but because there's also a level of altruism, and these companies aren't just profit seeking machines. There's for lack of a better word, these companies do have a heart, and you can read that. And having worked in one, I know that there is a strong respect for people and patients. And so they have to make a decision of which disease stage do we want to pursue? And then there's always the profitability questions. Which types of compounds have the best chance of getting to market? And then what is the potential revenue stream, risk or probability adjusted to, over a course of X number of years? And what's that? So you can compare those. So net present value, if you will, what is the net present value of this project versus that project? And sometimes they just have to make, sometimes those decisions may be easy, and sometimes those decisions are hard, and they have to just make those decisions. And then that's what differentiates profitability and performance between these companies, of how good these decisions they make.
Okay, so this is related directly to their business model.
Yeah.
How do they take these decisions?
Sure, because it may be, right, like we talked about earlier, it may be that certain companies are more externally focused in terms of being aware of the innovation that's happening in the world, and developing the capabilities to develop relationships with these areas and be the first in line to acquire the technologies if they acquire it externally, and then invest in the capabilities to develop it themselves and commercialize it. Other companies may be more internally focused. It's going to be 1,000 different shades of different colors all in between, but it most certainly is a part of their business model.
Okay, thank you very much. So another question that I have, it's because I am trying to find the characteristics of those companies, especially those startups or small, medium-sized companies who are involved in vaccine project for COVID. My question is, this is rather personal, is there any link between the size of the company and their engagement in the discovery of the vaccine for COVID? Because as you mentioned, probably, as far as I understood, the knowledge management within a smaller company is easier. That's why, it's easier for them, at Oxford University, or at Moderna or at Inovio, it's another startup in US that they're working on vaccine projects. Do you think it's something to do with the size and the knowledge management within the small companies, or no, there are many other reasons?
If I understand your question right, is how is it that these small companies are coming up with these great ideas versus
yes,
as well as the big
as
company?
well.
Yeah, I think that might be just a little channel bias there. If the situation was such, this company just started as a blank slate, and they said, all right, let's go develop a vaccine, then that would be an interesting question to ask. How do they do that? However, I think it's probably, and I don't know the histories of these companies, it's probably some researcher in a lab who already had this interest in research prior to the development of COVID, realized at some point prior to or at the onset of the COVID epidemic that he was sitting on something that could be a benefit. And so either he spun that out of his university or his research clinic into a company, or he licensed it to someone that wanted to start a company. And then from there, they acquired funding, dilutive or non-dilutive funding to grow. And so I think what we're seeing is just a well-timed, already developed research concept that was already in development and channel, and just happened to be very opportune at the time of an outbreak of COVID. That's my hypothesis on maybe what we're seeing there. Okay. And so I would just to answer your question, I don't think it's so much that there's, it's just they have, I think I answered it. They happen to be in the right spot at the right time and with good timing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think.
Yes. I have, I think, this is, we talk about drug repurposing. I think that this is probably a method repurposing in business model world for COVID vaccine. They're just trying to take the best from everywhere, and put them together and, do their best to manufacture this vaccine. Another question that people always ask people and professionals, so why do we need, I heard that there are at least 400 companies in the world that are working on vaccine projects. Do we need all of these different vaccines? Isn't it very stressful for people to discover that is it for business or it's for science, or because we do not know where we are heading?
Um, when you say 400 companies developing vaccines across all disease states, or just or COVID?
For COVID, I think they
Okay,
have.
wow, I didn't know that. Um, it's probably closer to the latter of your options. Everybody thinks that you know there's self-interest involved here. Everybody wants to develop the next greatest thing, not just for profitability, but also because it feels good to be so successful in creating something that makes a difference. And I don't think anybody's going to be saying out there saying that even there's 399 other companies and I'm going to quit because there's just too much competition. The nature of entrepreneurs is such that they all think that their option, their horse is going to win the race, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's just natural human behavior.
Yeah, yeah, we can say that. Definitely, definitely. And since the publication of your last article, and because you have the experience, you have already worked about the biotech companies and about the information about the data. You told me that you have worked about 250 companies. So do you think that this COVID has brought a new change in the business models of biotech companies, and a change that may stay here forever?
As far as business model, I don't know that it's really changed a lot in the way business models are, in terms of, because a lot of changes is already going on. I think that this COVID epidemic has maybe put some confidence into the momentum of that was already going on, especially an internal search for innovation, and the importance of a strong, very strong global network and looking for innovation anywhere around the world, not just in any one country. So like I said, I don't know that it's changed anything. I think it's just probably put some confidence into the processes that were already changing.
Mm-hmm. What about the collaboration? Because there are much more collaboration, I think, than before. And it's very important. That much collaboration has never existed among companies.
Yeah, I don't have any empirical data to show how much it's improved or not, but I think that kind of goes into my previous points. Like what I said earlier, there was, back in the old days of, if we're talking pharmaceuticals, there was certainly there was external search for innovation, but a lot of the research and development happened inside the house of a company. Whereas now it's not just a search externally, but it's a search globally, externally. It's not just the United States and not just parts of Europe, but it's China and Vietnam and Australia, and these great technologies can come from literally anywhere now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe you're right. But I think the expansion of it is not solely a function of just seeing the importance of it. It's just that more of the world, what we would call the developing world, is becoming much more adept at high value research, R&D, mm-hmm. and that's being recognized in the Western world as sources for innovation. Mm-hmm. And so supporting those sources and cultivating those sources and interacting with those sources is indeed expanding this part of the business model for businesses.
Okay, this part of the business model. Okay, so that's very important. But the different parts are all related or interrelated.
True, very true. Yeah.
And one part can influence the others.
Absolutely. In fact, they're codependent upon each other. If one falls out, then the rest become significantly less effective.
Okay. So yeah, so they create a lot of value, because this is the modern, it's not modern, but it's rather new, the concept of value creation for business models, as it has been described by Alex Osterwalder and his colleague, they're always continuing the same way. Describing I haven't read anything written from them about the pandemic or about the companies, how they are struggling, those who are there struggling, to survive, and those that they have been very successful, like the vaccine manufacturers or drug manufacturers, the treatments for COVID. That's a little bit the same story. So my question for you, that you have done the research about the biotech companies, how, I personally want to compare the characteristics of those companies who are working about vaccine project, the small ones, what are the information that I have to seek? That they're public information that I can have access to, and I can compare to.
So you're asking me, where can you get more information about what's going on inside these smaller biotechs, or
what type of information is needed to that will let me to come into a conclusion about the common characteristics that may exist among them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to be a little selfish here right now. That was indirectly, that was one of my interests in my second
Sure.
paper. I can send you the references after the end, but I developed a model I called the ECLQO model, and each letter stands for a capability that a company has that enables it to more effectively identify important information external to the firm, bring that in and understand it and manipulate it and grow it, and then convert that into success somehow. I'll send you the model later, but the first one, the E, stands for an external orientation. So, and that the point is that a firm's survival is a function of discovering, retaining, and utilizing ideas external to the firm. And so there's capabilities that help companies do that. For example, I forget the name of the researchers that come up with the concept of Edison scientists and Pasteur scientists. So applied scientists versus basic scientists, and having the right mix of those within a company and utilizing the networks that they inherently have and cultivating a network for them to build drives a greater awareness of what ideas are out there in the various R&D centers. Cluster participation is another of my factor, that stands for the C. And that's just the importance that location of where a firm locates itself is important to a firm. So when you're, say, put your company in that cluster that's right out, I think southeast of Paris. I forget the name of that cluster there in Paris, or San Francisco, or Boston, or Heidelberg, you name it. There's an incredible value there in terms of, finding the right scientists or the right employees or the engineers. When one leaves, you're finding another one in, or just there's this constant cross-pollination of ideas and relationships that you're able to take advantage of. And then the other three areas are learning capabilities of a firm. Again, this is a function of the types of personnel you have inside that allows them to understand the knowledge when they do find it, and then convert that into a commercializable product. The Q in the model stands for a qualified business management team. There's extremes where companies are led by a scientist who just maybe spun out a company out of a lab, who knows nothing about business. And at the other extreme, there is a pure business guy who knows nothing about the science. And somewhere in between is this optimal mix of experience that plays a role, especially in a new start company where that CEO has his hands on lots of different pieces of the puzzle. And then the last one is just organizational controls, which is a little difficult to explain verbally right here, but It's the ability of a company to create very concrete and stable routines for knowledge conveyance and knowledge development within the firm that can be controlled and cultivated. And so in my third paper, I created proxies that represent each of these 5 factors, and I think it was a little over 200 companies, and we built a multivariate model that looked at how these factors influence of the performance of a firm, of a company. And so back to your question, these are what I try to use to look inside of a very, what is typically very intransparent pre-public companies to try to get some sense of how robust and how successful they could be. Outside of other things that you can do. When you can also just look at what type of technology is the company developing.
Yeah,
Is it an already validated technology that's on the market and this is just a me too? Is it a completely new type of technology like CRISPR gene editing would have represented a few years back? And then depending on where that falls onto a spectrum, that kind of gives you some sense of what the potential of a company is. It also helps, you could use other proxies as terms of, what venture capital companies are getting involved, not just how much money that they're receiving. I mean, that's inherently, because if a VC consortium has decided to give a company 10 million, well, that's by proxy, they've already vetted the company. They've already looked inside the company and they've said, all right, they're worth 10 million. But it's also a little bit too, the brand of the VC company too. That says a lot about, if you look at their portfolio of companies and what their success record has been, that can give you a little insight into the potential of a company and what's going on inside.
Okay, and are these information public, James? Can I have access to these? Do you think this information?
Yeah, all of this is public. Everything that I put into my model was public, or required a subscription to something like Crunchbase that gave me some information, a ready database for their venture capital money or things like that. But things like LinkedIn is a great area for understanding CEO profiles and their background, because it typically lists their resumes on there. It's also an area to understand. You can go to PubMed or other U.S. Patent Office databases and understand how many patents a company has. That kind of gives you some sense of that, or how many even research. Often researchers or companies that put out publications will have some reference in that's in that paper that's searchable. So that kind of gives you a sense of the types of Pasteur and Edison scientists that they have, some mix of that. If you want to look at that, I'll reference these papers. If you want to look at my second and third paper, I kind of lay out that methodology quite clearly of how I did that. It's not perfect, but it was you put your finger on one of the key challenges that we all have when it comes to pre-public companies.
Yes, thank you very much. But why didn't you create a survey or any interviews? It was not possible? They didn't answer?
I guess I could have gone that way, but I just chose a different. I chose a different way to do it. I mean, I guess you could, as open as you can get them to be, and that would be another way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to do it now, during COVID and post-COVID, what will you change in the way that you did that research? What will you add as new proxies or new questions to this research?
Man, I don't know.
We talked a lot about it. I suppose that this may give you some ideas.
Well, no, my model's perfect. I would change nothing.
Okay. That's the best, right?
I would probably methodologically. I like your idea. I would have gone in and cross-reference it with some with some interviews to confirm that my proxies were accurate enough to represent that. That would be a good idea. But I don't think the market vaccine development hasn't significantly changed business models of this industry in such a way that I think the model would need to be changed.
My hypothesis is that it has changed, but I have to, I have to study this. I have to do a research to find out how it has changed and, what are the main reasons. I have some, I can guess, I can make a list of the reasons why it has changed. Yeah. But I think, we have undergone, it's not only the vaccine companies, pharmaceutical companies also, because I also work about the drug repurposing, repositioning for COVID treatments. And I have studied about the case of the French companies, and I have found out a lot of very information, very interesting information. It was surprisingly interesting. So, so those companies that have been very conservative, they became very innovative. So it's a big change. It's a big change in their mentality, strategy, business, everything. Yeah. So I think
I'd be interested if you ever want to have a deeper conversation on that. I find that fascinating. I have some hypotheses too why that might be, but I would love to bounce it off of.
Okay, about drug repurposing or about the vaccines?
About what you mentioned, the change in innovation practices.
Yes.
One quick idea is just the significant amount of, I'm not calling it free money, but the free money.
Sure.
It allows one to be more risk averse and put some projects on the back burner that normally wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes. That's financial support. It's definitely one, but they have done the innovations. It was beyond their expectations. It was because they had a new way to observe, things, and they had a new observation, in many, this results from several hospitals in France, especially in Paris, that they found out, as an example, that one or two of the antidepressant that they have prescribed for mental health patients, have had a very positive effect to protect patients from catching COVID virus. And it was only because due to the observation, it was nothing to do with the money that they received. So these are very interesting,
Indeed.
Yeah, under which condition that they can innovate. And they have published, it was so interesting that they invested in that research, and they have published several articles. That one of them is on PubMed. I can send you, that's a very interesting one. And so, there are many stories like this, that can be investigated, and many things may emerge from that about the new models of innovations that is much more closer to us than even, we can guess. So that's it. So I'm quite hopeful for the future of the innovation in pharmaceuticals and in vaccines for all of the treatments for all types of diseases, So I think this is a question of organization, management, business model, investment, and observation altogether. But I do not have a model, ready-made. I'm working on that. I have to do more research and send surveys to the companies. And I hope that they are, even because of the solidarity and because they want to participate in the research, they can be receptive and send back the surveys. I hope so. And I do not know, up to, some people just, they run 15 interviews and they say the research is complete. You have worked about 250 companies,
Well, it's like 209 or something like that. But it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine, Why did you choose to work on 209? You could give a model with less than that.
No? I actually have a friend of mine who's quite the statistician, and through all of our analysis and the setup of the model, we needed at least that many to create to find a statistical significance.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. We actually needed more,
No.
The model could be strengthened with a greater, as always, with a greater data set, right?
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, James, thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you for everything.
Thank you as well. We should stay in touch.
Yes, yes, sure, sure. And I will send you our the link to our YouTube channel. You can watch the other interviews and webinars.
Okay.
Yes. And if you want to join us for the next webinar at the end of the January, I can send you an invitation, you know.
Please do. Yeah. I'm kind of solidly involved in industry right now, but I like to keep a toe in the pool of academia and staying involved in conversations as best I can. So this is right along what I like.
Sure. Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you very much for everything. Have a nice afternoon. And please send me the references if you can. When you can. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.